Good afternoon and welcome to another Monday Madness here, of course, because it's supposed to be at night and it's not. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll tell you what, we are so excited to have our guests coming on. And Chuck, it's incredible all the amount of guests you've had on this great show to help us understand, Mental Health Mondays is so important to help people get through, obviously, what they're feeling through this pandemic. But you've certainly brought on incredible guests. And this one's one of my favorite. I watch them all the time, comment all the time. I throw things at the TV, at the CBC, but certainly not when Ron MacLean is on. How you doing? What a great week we've had.
Yeah, I'm just like a kid in a candy store today because, I say this a lot, but I have been fortunate enough to have a lot of great guests. I mean, Mental Health Mondays has been a wonderful year this year that we can share messages of connection with people and how they need to process it and how they need to connect to it. But one of the greatest storytellers that I know of that gets zero credit for the ability to storytell, as far as I'm concerned, is Canadian icon Ron MacLean. Obviously, he's better known in the hockey circles. But if you actually dip into Ron's other side, you're going to find a wonderful connection to music, to storytelling, to his books. I mean, community, charities. I mean, the list is just endless for what Ron does. And I'm really excited about having him on the show today.
Well, I'm as excited as you are. I'm going to obviously just say hello as Ron comes up, and then I will go, just like any viewer, just want to listen to you talk with Ron MacLean and all the stories. I got to meet him in Whitby. I've met him a couple times, but the one time I remember with Wayne and Keith Primo out in Whitby, and he was just so gracious with his time and has helped so many people along the way. So looking forward to that. All right, listen, I know that you wanted to ask me a question.
Yeah, so like you had your ice hockey classic this weekend as well, and I want to ask how that went. I'm looking forward to going to Australia next year and New Zealand as well. But how did that go?
Listen, I know a lot of people want to get to Ron, so I'm gonna do the old Cole's notes real quickly. Listen, it was fantastic with the trials and tribulations and learning how to pivot. As I've mentioned to you, I feel like Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, having to change directions all the time. It's supposed to happen in December, as you know, it didn't. Back and forth. And I just got to say, what a tremendous event. We had players from NHL players, Drake Kajula, of course, former NHL players. Zenon Konopka at 40 could still play. Look at the list. Wayne Primo was coaching, Dennis Maruk, Jimmy Thompson, Greg Johnson, Justin Pekka, and there's Kevin Noble, who flew in all the way from British Columbia to be with us. And Zenon put the equipment on, hadn't had it on for 2 years. And he was playing against kids that were 18, 19, 20 from the Aurora Tigers, all the way through to CIS, to the NCAA players. He did not look out of place. And Parasports did the live stream, and it was streamed at 10 o'clock p.m. I know it's too late for you to stay up, but it was actually broadcast specifically for the New Zealand and Australian market. As you know, they have been shut down. I've just noticed that they're shutting Australia down for another 3 weeks, and also New Zealand now will be shut down for another week. So it was if there's a perfect timing, it was great for us because we had over 2,500 streams of the event and nothing but spectacular. The game was great. It ended up 9-8 in overtime, and Tyler Davis scored an incredible goal to win it. So I'm just honored. Agile Group in Adelaide helped us put it together. Jimmy Thompson, big shout out. What a tremendous guy. And of course, Jordan Larage, our producer, was the goaltender. He was down 4-1 after the first half, but I'll tell you what, he made incredible saves to keep Canada in it, because that first period, it was completely dominated by the Americans, and I think we wore them out. The Canadians came back 7-1 going into the third period. I know it sounds crazy, but a well-deserved 8-8 tie with only 30 seconds. It was not staged. Some people said, come on. It actually was exactly what was advertised. Young guys putting their heart out to entertain. So thank you for asking me about that.
Before we go, I just want to do a little housekeeping with a couple passings today that we heard about with Rod Gilbert, a consummate gentleman. Obviously, I'm a Flyers fan, and he was a lifetime Ranger. I got the chance to meet Rod at the Alumni Classic in Philadelphia in 2012 there, and just a consummate gentleman. And obviously Jimmy Hayes as well, that we just found out too, that passed away.
Yeah, Rod, I got a chance several times to meet at the Hockey Hall of Fame inductions. True gentleman, just very, very, very confident, yet very accommodating, and I really enjoyed it. I do want to do just one shout out as you get ready for Ron. I do want to say the event was for Stop Concussions and Connected Mental Health, and that's why we're here today. And also for the Garna Boomerangs, the first Indigenous team to come from Australia to Edmonton. So Chuck, thank you for having me on today as part of your co-host. I'm really looking for, I just want to say hello to Ron, and then I'm off the screen for you guys to entertain the crowd.
I don't blame you. Let's bring up Ron.
Well, that was exciting, Kerry. First of all, congratulations on that. Zenon Konopka's in my book, Hockey Towns. We have a beautiful chapter on Zenon, and he's a good friend of Kevin Biex's, with whom I work on Hockey Night in Canada. And you mentioned Jimmy Thompson. I just did an event for the Child Advocacy Center in central Alberta, Red Deer, and it's Sheldon Kennedy started it, and he's kind of handed the reins to Terry Lowen, whose brother Darcy Lowen played in the NHL, and Darcy Lowen and Jim Thompson were kind of a frickin' frack for quite a bit of time in pro hockey. So there's a lot of connections there. And you mentioned the deceased, the goal game line, obviously Jean Rattel, Rod Gilbert, and Vic Hadfield. I live in Oakville, and I hit golf balls almost every other day at Vic Hadfield's Golf Training Academy on Trafalgar. And our team here in Oakville is named the Rangers. All boys minor hockey are Rangers, and that's for Vic Hadfield, who's an Oakvillian, and was a dear friend of Rod Gilbert's. And then, both of you, we were discussing the tragedy in Surrey, BC as well, the car accident that claimed the life of Caleb Reimer. I was just watching some of his Edmonton Oil Kings. You just see what an incredible hockey player Caleb is, and Ronan Sharma and Parker Magnuson. Just our hearts go out because I, as a boy, lived in Whitehorse, Yukon. We never dreamt anybody from Whitehorse would appear in the National Hockey League, but it's happened with Dylan Cousins playing for the Buffalo Sabres. But he left Whitehorse as a youngster to go down to Delta, to the academy there. So it's a great program. It's just heartbreaking for the families, and no words comfort at the moment. But we'll be there, and we'll honor the boys through hockey, just as we did with the Broncos. You talked about all those great players helping you, Kerry, in Edmonton and Australia. That'll be a spirit around the families that will be of some help.
Well, just as I let you two go, because I want to hear every word, I'll be watching attentively. And I'm really excited to hear that. I do want to say, though, Ron, you've actually aged us, because Vic Hadfield's golf, I don't think it's there anymore. So
it's there. I'm just there this week. Yeah, it's right at the intersection of Burnham Thorpe and Trafalgar, and it's a roaring success. They have pros from the Oakville Golf Club teach there, and his son Jeff runs it. And it's a great little. There's two ranges not far from one another on Burnham Thorpe, but you can find Vic Hadfield's there.
All right, then I got to go. This was a long time ago. I was out there with Ronnie Ellis, of course. All right, guys, thank you so much, Chuck. I know you're going to have a great show. Thank you for accommodating us at 2:00 this afternoon, all the listeners and viewers. Make sure you put some comments there. Any questions, we'll make sure Jordan's going to take very good care of you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Mr. MacLean.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry.
Thanks, Goosh. Ron, we finally got rid of the Goosh there. Just me and you on the show as well.
That was good. It was.
Well, first of all,
nice to hear.
Before I start off, I want to thank you for coming on the show as well. I mean, I always enjoy our chats, and for whatever reason, you've always made time for me as well. I met you first back in 2010 on the set of the Battle of the Blades, and I've just enjoyed watching you work behind the scenes. I think, obviously, on Mental Health Monday, we talk about themes that connect people. Having good mental health is a really important thing. And I think the power of storytelling, to me, is one of the most amazing gifts that human beings have. And hockey aside, I think that you have that most amazing gift, not just in hockey, but just telling your story, whether it be through your books, whether it be through music, whether it be through your charities, community work, that when you do so much of that behind the scenes. Not a lot of people know how much work you do behind the scenes in charities and communities as well. So having you on the show to talk about storytelling, I couldn't think of a more fitting person than you.
Well, feelings mutual, Chuck. You were kind of a source of comfort in the early trauma of Battle of the Blades, because I had never worked with toe picks, and I didn't wear them much the initial season, but I by year 2 was wearing them. And although I shaved off the jumping pick, is the big one at the front of the blade, and I still had to deal with 6 others though. So it was a lot of terror in that high wire act of hosting Battle of the Blades. But that show, I just think of the cast and crew and collaboration. The biggest thing about that show, Chuck, that was so special is the respect I grew up as a hockey player, hating the figure skaters, of course, because they wanted the ice a little bit warmer. They wanted the ice, so they booked hours away from us. And we had, it was just a good natured rivalry, but we didn't really love figure skaters. And I'm sure they didn't feel too much for us. But on that set, the respect between the two sports was beyond belief. And I look at the charts nowadays in music, Chuck, half the hits are collaborations. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's a really common thing now for great artists to collaborate on a hit song. And that spirit I saw on Battle of the Blades first, a real getting together of men and women, of separate interests, forming a team. It was a really special run, Battle of the Blades. And you were there for the whole run, and you always were a smile and, as I say, a source of grace and comfort.
I think one of the greatest things that I ever had to go through with Battle of the Blades is my future ex-wife, Katarina Witt, make the appearance. And I spent all day making a shirt for her that says, "I love Kat." And Jeremy was in the dressing room, Jeremy Roenick at the time, and he was in the dressing room getting his makeup on. And I just pulled in the backside there, and he's like, "Chuck, this is my friend Kat." And I was like, da, 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 da. It's like, "Chuck, this is Kat. Kat, this is Chuck." And it's like, you have no idea. Like in that moment where you see your future ex-wife and you think you're just going to be cool, and I'm just going to mess this up 150%. Well, she was such a great sport, and she signed autographs, and she got pictures and gave me little bunny ears behind the pictures and stuff like that, and that was amazing.
Yeah, she did our Halloween special, and she stole the show, of course. Kat, that was the thing. We would bring in celebrity judges. And for those who know figure skating, we had Tyler Cranston, we had Christopher Dean of Torvill and Dean fame. I mean, these are the who's who, the creme de la creme of the figure skating world. And they would sit kind of a little bit on the edge of their seat, amazed at what they were witnessing. It was certainly not world-class jumping, but it was phenomenal to see the hockey players take that chance to emote, to create some sizzle, some romance. It was a really special show. But to have Kat join us on it, and that was Kurt Browning and Sandra Bezic. Their connections ran deep, and we were always able to attract a really good cast to round out the show. Yeah,
and before we start off, we'll get back to Battle of the Blades as well. But what I wanted to start off with is your books. So Jordan, if we can just pull up the books of Ron's right now that you had written, obviously with the help of Christy McClellan Day.
Yeah.
And walk through your books and the process that you had in writing them. Obviously, like I've written 3 books myself, and there is a catharsis piece, in expressing yourself. I always say that whenever I'm writing and my higher self kicks in, I'm never in the room. Like Clark Kent and Superman in the same spot. When you were telling these stories and rolling them out and connecting us with the storytelling of Canadian folklore, what was your piece and process that you went through that changed you for the better when you came on the other side of book writing?
Well, it's a funny thing. I didn't read till I was probably in my mid-30s. I'm mortified to say that, but I was just a child of television and new age media, and so I didn't read. And now I read voraciously, and I learned, especially through Shakespeare, that you could never find Shakespeare in any of his writing, which is, to your point, if you can kind of separate yourself. When I went into this, Chuck, the first book was called Cornered. It was a bit closer to a memoir. Kirsty McClellan Day, her husband, Larry Day, was the news anchor at CFAC television in Calgary. So it was kind of like a favor to Kirsty, because she'd always come after me and say, "Ron, got to do a book. And I didn't want to do a book. I actually believed this idea that you should wait till you're 70 to do your memoir, because you might know something by the time you're 70. But I did it at 50. And then I thought, well, my mom is gone. My dad has got just a little bit of dementia. I think he would really appreciate the story of really our life, Lila, Ron Sr., and myself. I'm an only child. So I did it as kind of a thank you card to Dad. And Kirsty was great. She could accelerate. You tell your guests, try to keep your answers to 90 seconds, and I can't. And so a book would have been horrible in my hands alone. I needed that ghostwriter to help me to facilitate, because for sure I just can't seem to finish a thought quickly. So it was a great exercise to do that one for Dad. It had a lot of the stories of people that I worked with at Hockey Night in Canada, so it was also a thank you to them. And then I moved into the second one, was kind of a companion book to the Hometown Hockey series, which is where we go across the country to various communities and tell the grassroots stories. And we just tapped into that to have a book to give out at meet and greets when we're on the road. There's
And
corner.
then we got cornered as well. And even your titles, like I can hear your voice saying them.
Yeah, well, puns, as you know, are a huge addiction, and I love puns. You know, Shakespeare loved puns. Not to put myself in his neighborhood, but the thing about a pun for me is that words. You know, we put a lot of stock in words, and God knows they're important, but to a point. Actions are obviously always going to be more important than words, and words are very arbitrary in terms of their interpretation. You know, if I have a pet peeve, and I'll never solve this, and neither will you, Chuck, but Mental Health Mondays is a good idea to try and combat the idea you are what you're perceived to be. That's the biggest shackle that holds us all prisoner or hostage, is that, you know, we gauge ourselves on by the outlook or outreach of someone else's opinion. You are what you're perceived to be is a terrible way to live your life. And I just find it, was really useful to write, to be a part of writing, to do that book Cornered and to use a pun, because words are arbitrary and they can be interpreted different ways. And if you don't like puns, chances are you're a person who's very buttoned down in your life. You want control, you want order. Johnson, who wrote the first dictionary, Samuel Johnson, he hated puns because he wanted it, a word to mean what it is, but they never do. And what killed puns was the printing press, because suddenly, here, which can be HERE or HEAR, now you had to see it, and some of the puns were lost in actual visual.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, about the perception, because I think I'm a culmination of 1,000 different people from 1,000 different perceptions. Everybody sees me differently. I see me incredibly differently from everybody else. The reason why I know this is because I'm the worst critic of Chuck Basti. No one will judge me worse than me. Yeah. And so I have a real hatred at times for who Chuck Basti is. And then I have to have a real conversation, talking about that isn't really who you are. Right. And I think we all, as human beings, we all fall into that category of things not going the way that we wanted them to go or plan to go. And I think somebody gave me a great piece of advice that, you're an actor on the stage, and the director is God, universe, source, whatever you want to call a higher being than ourselves. And it would be like the whole night before you're learning your lines, you get called up to the scene, and then all of a sudden the director says, "Hey, listen, by the way, we've decided to rewrite that scene last night. That we didn't like that, me and the writers, and these are your new lines." And we as human beings would just say, "Well, no, I don't want to learn these new lines. This isn't what I learned. I learned these lines." And the director's like, "Well, look, there's new lines now, and we need to learn how to pivot." I think during COVID, it's been a real on the court battle of having to learn how to pivot, whether you had a choice or not. We've just been thrown in that direction as well. And I think even when we're doing Mental Health Mondays from this time last year to now, I think that the connection that we all start talking about our significant, whether it be obstacles or views or mental health illnesses or personality disorders. Right now, it's starting to let people out and share their stories, so that way they don't feel isolated, but they feel more connected to the human experience. And then we can actually take some action as well before the stigma, takes over, like you said.
I don't know if this is the case, but I think, in the old days, religion was a great form of help to folks. You could use the saints, the martyrs, as your heroes. Now we use sports figures and rock stars, but religion was kind of a blanket for a lot of people, and we got away from that in a more secular world. And now you were kind of on your own to solve the new script each day. So I agree with you that, pivoting Buddhism is all about impermanence and accepting it. Some other religions kept you on track by saying there's, eternal forgiveness or hope, and there's rules by which you can play in order to achieve, immortality. And there were all kinds of little guideposts that we've kind of moved away from in a modern world. So you're working without a net, and that's why this communication. I do believe conversation, Chuck, is vital. That was Shakespeare's whole secret. All the wisdom was revealed in conversation. Hamlet, Prince Hal, and his Falstaff, they would share ideas, and that's where you learned. It wasn't heavy-handed. It wasn't a pronouncement. It wasn't a set of rules, but it was a conversation that revealed the truth. Cervantes, same thing with Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. So conversation is our maybe our new religion.
I want to pivot because I think anybody who knows Ron MacLean really well will know your absolute savant knowledge of music. And I think people who don't know Ron MacLean as well in the industry might hear you mention music. But I've never asked you, but why is music so important to you? And obviously, you're such a huge advocate of great music. I mean, I texted you last week. You were at the Sam Roberts concert. I saw you at the Heart concert a couple of years ago before COVID hit in as well. But why is music so important to you?
Well, my mom was a huge singer and lover of music. She used to like a show on CBC called Hymn Sing, which was kind of church music. We're not, well, I shouldn't say we're not, but my parents were probably more religious than I am. I kind of entered into the secular void. But Mom loved hymn sing, and I can always remember when I was a young boy, about 5 or 6 years old, she ran into the TV room and turned it on, and she'd missed the start of the show, and she said, "I've missed the start of hymn sing shit." And I thought, Mom, how can you watch a religious show and then swear in front of it? But I was 5 years old. But yeah, she had music playing a fair bit of the time, and I mean, both the storytelling and music are probably owing to Cape Breton roots. My parents are both Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, so there's a little of that. And then, Chuck, I started my career as a DJ, and so it became absolutely fundamental for me to both spin records, know about the artists, find ways to work with the music. Even though I wasn't a musician, I was still doing the song intro, which would be anywhere from 4 to 40 seconds, and trying to play with the percussion and try to play with the horns and speak to a set amount of time, which was a great training for television. But yeah, music, like even thinking Mental Health Mondays, I go back to Men at Work, Colin Hay, Overkill, and a lot of the stuff that he was doing was really on point for mental health, and he was doing it in the 80s. And I'm sure you could give countless examples of music. Certainly within the Frederick Douglass, who wrote the book on. He's a great abolitionist and women's right advocate, who he was called the Prophet of Freedom. And he talked about the slaves, would go and gather in the woods and sing when payday came along. And for some, payday was a blanket. For some, it might be a portion of food. It was never money. But after the payday, which happened twice a month, they would go and sing. So music kind of is clearly a form of celebration that we all need.
What I love about music is, and this is kind of an odd observation, but whenever you see someone, like a couple of years ago, Gordon Lightfoot died. It was on the radio. He heard that. I think he was at the Cambridge Club downtown. And someone told him, "Hey, listen, you're on the radio right now trending that you died." And it was just like everybody chimed in, "Rest in peace, Gordon Lightfoot." And of course, I don't think Gordon's released a new piece of music in the last 30 years. Could be wrong, but everyone has that connection to where they were the first time they heard Gordon Lightfoot, or the first time they heard Bohemian Rhapsody, or the artist. And the person who passes away, even though you haven't heard from them, you don't know them, we have this innate connection to that one person that we never knew, just because they connect us to our childhood or where we were at that moment. And that's the power of music. And I think I know myself, if I've ever had a bad day, the first thing I do is I go throw on some tunes, and I have a little select choice. Or if I'm running, and my ego starts coming in saying, "We're too old for this. Stop doing this. Let's go back and eat nachos." I got to listen to the music to get me through that kickstart. And music's a very cathartic piece of that.
Have you heard the new Jackson Browne, Downhill from Everywhere? He's got a new album. It's called Downhill from Everywhere, is the title track by Jackson Browne, and he's touring right now with James Taylor. But oh my God, it's fantastic. And I think of all the times I heard, like in the case of Bohemian Rhapsody, I remember first time I heard Bohemian Rhapsody, first time I heard Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing, first time I heard Boston, More Than a Feeling, first time I heard Loverboy, Turn Me Loose, all those riffs, all those opening, first time I heard Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine. Usually they were the introduction to the band. I mean, the band may have existed, but this is the first time they hit. And they hit, and you knew you were experiencing greatness just by that opening riff. And I could tell you where I was in front of a 7-Eleven, or where I was on a Trafalgar, or where I was, the moment I heard it for the first time, and it never leaves you. It's an imprint that music is capable of, and it's part math and it's part emotion, and yeah, fantastic.
And I mean, in our world of hockey, obviously you've met everybody literally that you probably want to meet or could meet or have to meet. And but on the music side, who's someone that you're just really geeked out to when you met
Well, it was
And
neat to
you're just
meet
like,
Gordon Lightfoot. It definitely was
yeah,
neat. You know, I was more a guitar guy than a lyrics guy. Again, it just makes no sense. I didn't read and I wasn't into lyrics, and I ended up in a vocation where you should try to be a wordsmith. But I of course grew to respect it greatly as I aged. And I had a dear friend growing up, Pat Quinnell in Red Deer, Alberta, who loved Gordon Lightfoot. And I thought, what is wrong with you? Why can't you appreciate Tom Sawyer by Rush? Anyway, I met Gordon, and I was at his home in Toronto. And at
Park
that
Lane.
time, yes, right. Drake lived across the street. He's
Yeah,
moved
he still
since.
does it.
But yeah, but you know, so you had Gordon Lightfoot sitting on a rickety old Canadian Tire polyester lawn chair on his front step, having a cigarette, looking across the street at Drake's mansion. And I thought, wow, somebody record this. Yeah, but Lightfoot's, you know, Barry Keane, the drummer, is a great hockey fan and a big Leafs fan. And he told me a funny story about, you know, when Carter Lancaster came aboard to play guitar for Gordon Lightfoot. And he said, I hate to say it, Barry Keane said, but a few of Gord's songs do sound a bit alike. So Carter Lancaster, lead guitar now, and he's everybody else in the band has been there for forever. He said, so when Gordon would give you the set list, he never adhered to the set list. He always ad-libbed and felt the night. And he would start a number, and Carter Lancaster, you'd see the panic come over his face. And so Barry Keane, the drummer, would be going like this. So that means it's early morning rain. So all the communication around Gordon to know what song he was actually launching into. And yeah, genius, special guy. He was one for sure. I, you know, got to know Gord Downey and the guys from the Hip, and Jim Cuddy and Greg Keeler from Blue Rodeo. One thing I always probably tell this too often, Chuck, but it's fascinating how many, like Greg Keeler of Blue Rodeo, one of the two front men, is a goaltender in hockey. Alan Doyle, Great Big C, is a goaltender in hockey. Gord Downey, Tragically Hip, goaltender in hockey. Andy Mays, Skydiggers, goaltender in hockey. Luke Doucette, White Falcon, goaltender in hockey. David Francie, they're all goalies. There's some weird link between.
We're a different breed. We're a different breed. Yeah. Not that I'm a lead singer, but I'm a goalie. But yeah, like we have that disconnect of you know, frontman connect, right? Like we're definitely not drummers. Goalies are drummers. Like
yeah.
I wanted to bring up hometown hockey because I mean, you and I had been talking at Conrad Lineman and Jane Rue's gallery. I guess it was back in 2014 or 2015. And we were talking about obviously when Strombo was going to be the new Canadian Hockey Night in Canada host as well, and that was something that kind of sat with me. That was just kind of gutting. And you know, when you said, "Hey, well, listen, you know, I'm not really worried about this. You know, we have this new project coming out called Hometown Hockey. I'm really excited about this," and I had no idea what that was. And what it's blossomed to be. And every time I watch that, you know, wherever you are across Canada, it really doesn't matter because the energy comes up. And I've seen you at, you know, 2 or 3 of them. And, you know, in between intermissions, when you're on the air, after the intermissions, you go to the tents, you sign autographs nonstop, you sneak back again to the studio and you go through that again. But at the same time, it's just like, tell me about your experience with hometown hockey, because obviously you and Tara have been doing that for a while.
Well, pennies from heaven, Chuck, for sure. I think back to when I was a young boy. My father was Air Force, so we moved around a lot, and you were always being scooped up and having to try and find new friends, and a lot of abandonment issues when you're a child of the military. But it's also a great upbringing because it does teach you resilience. It does teach you to be outgoing a little bit. And I was in Whitehorse, Yukon, and Bobby Hull was a superstar in the National Hockey League. He came to visit, and he sat and he signed and he signed and he did photographs, and he was amazing. And I got to meet Jean Beliveau in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Gordie Howe at Calgary Stampede. And I just realized that these guys were making it a firsthand experience for someone who no more had a chance of getting to an NHL game being in Whitehorse or Mill Cove, Nova Scotia than the man on the moon. And that's what hometown hockey does. It makes it all of us who enjoy Hockey Night in Canada, and I saw somebody just mention the Hockey Night theme written by the late Dolores Clayman. She just passed last month. She was a great jingle writer for MacLean Advertising, and she created the theme song, which TSN CTV purchased. It's funny because Michael Bublé almost bought it. He was going to buy it and keep it on Hockey Night on CBC, but it was a little over $3 million per year, and he balked at doing that. So anyway, I remember Hull and how he made an impact on me. And I know I'm not Bobby Hull, but some of the alumni who come to join us, and Tara and I are on every week and telling the story of grassroots Canadian hockey. It's just a really magical interaction. It's two teachers in the room, right, Chuck? You and I are big proponents of learning. And when we hit I can't even tell you how many impressive coaches, John Batchelor of the Burnaby Winter Club, or John Goyens of Lac St. Louis Lions. And they are the Scotty Bowmans and Al Arbors of their little towns. And back to Delta, in the academy there, which is just a phenomenal program. So yeah, the show is special, and I'm really grateful because it reminds me a little bit of Peter Zosky's Morningside. Was a great CBC radio show that connected the country, and it reminds me of Wide World of Sports on ABC back in the day with Jim McKay. Yeah. These are old memories for some.
There's a picture of you and Tara Sloan. So I spoke to Tara this week, and she told me to ask you about your meeting at Starbucks. And I had no idea what she's talking about, but she said, yeah, ask Ron about the meeting at Starbucks. It's pretty funny story. So.
Well, so I'm told by Gord Cutler, who was a producer who'd come over from TSN to be Rogers was starting up with their 12-year deal, and he was kind of the guy in charge of all the shows. And he said, Ron, I'd like you to meet at Starbucks at 2:00 on a whatever day of the week it was. And so it's Tara Sloan. I'd like you to meet her because we're considering her for hosting duties on our hometown hockey show. And now at this point, we don't know anything about who's going to be doing hometown hockey or what it is. But I go to the Starbucks, and there's Tara with a girlfriend, and her girlfriend gets up and leaves, and I'm sitting and talking to Tara, and we're waiting for Gord Cutler, and he never does show up. He just wanted to see if the two of us could coexist, and that was the moral of that story. And I talked a lot, of course, about music with her. I didn't know a lot about Tara, which is funny because she'd been on the In Excess reality TV show, and Joy Drop was a very successful Canadian alternate rock band. But I only Googled and learned that, prior to meeting her. And so I was able to fudge small talk. But she's, her, she's extremely social and gracious. And yeah, it was a great introduction to two people not knowing what the hell they were about to launch into for now 7 years. Good one. Yeah. You're muted there, but this is Colt Knorr and a great. Well, I don't know what stop that is. Where would that be? Whitby?
That was in Georgetown, and
Georgetown.
That's my friend Victoria there. That's geeking out with Colt Knorr. But you really rescued me on this one, Ron, because at the Battle of the Blades, I had Victoria and her daughter on the front row in Hamilton, and this little tiger of her daughter, I think she's 7 years old right now, might have been 5 back then. But she sat there cross-armed. She's just like, if you don't get me to meet Ron MacLean, I'm never talking to you ever again. And I'm just like, look at the sass on this little thing. Yeah. I said, okay, I'm going to do my best. Obviously, we get to Georgetown. They live in Georgetown. And I remember taking you aside and say, listen, you got to bail my ass out of this one, because if you don't come over and say hi to Victoria's daughter, she's going to punch me in the face. And so every time a 5-year-old punches an adult in the face in a parking lot at hometown hockey, the police are probably going to get called. So thank you for bailing me out on that one.
Is Victoria's daughter a figure skater? Because you need to have that kind of self-confidence. I think it's the bravest bullfighting or bull riding. Pick your one from rodeo and figure skating, I think, are the two bravest athletic endeavors on earth. It's just unbelievable I know downhill racing, and I could give you a million death-defying sports, but something about that figure skater waiting. Like I know, Chuck, on Battle of the Blades, I've done maybe a 40 or 45 second skate, and I know the fear I feel, and I can't even imagine the Olympic crosshairs. So that if she is a figure skater, that explains that.
Well, Victoria was a figure skater. Grace is not a figure skater, but she's obviously following the figure skating pathway. So I mean, that was obviously for her it was a huge thing. Even getting tickets to Battle of the Blades for her was a huge thrill as well, just to be around the big people.
Great kid show, right? It just that to have the children at those shows. It reminds me, and it's terrible, but when I was a boy, I was a big fan of Stampede Wrestling. I grew up in Alberta mostly, and there was a wrestling show that I was in love with, and Ed Whalen was the play-by-play guy for wrestling, and he would ultimately be the guy I worked with on Calgary Flames broadcasts doing the NHL too. But I just remember the joy I got from the theater of wrestling. And in a way, figure skating has, like they say, clothes make a statement, costumes tell a story. And figure skating is the story that kind of is closest to wrestling for me.
Well, let's segue there because that's a perfect time to bring in Battle of the Blades. I want to start off by just saying that's me opening night at what used to be Cops Coliseum,
right,
in Hamilton, 2019, with my Don Cherry suit there. I don't even know how I found a shirt to match that Tim Hortons cup that I'm holding, but
it's great. Yeah.
But Sandra Bezic, had this idea. And for whatever reason, I said to her 1,000 times, thank God you didn't listen to people when they told you what a stupid idea it would have been to put,
including me,
together.
Right. I thought not a chance this show could work. So,
yeah, I'm glad that you're wrong about that because, one thing I really love and I really, really love and truly hold dear with Battle of the Blades is no matter what you're going through in life, no matter what kind of job you work, no matter what kind of illness you're dealing with, the escape that people get to have and experience for that 1 hour where they can put all their problems behind, they can go onto that TV channel or onto the live event and then watch people who are professionals at what they do, put their vulnerability hat aside and just step out there and skate for something bigger than themselves, which is their charity and the difference that it makes for these kids in the charities. To me, that just made perfect business sense, for Sandra Bezic to put that show together. And I know it takes a lot of resources to bring that to bear. You have to, house the athletes for months at a time and fly their families in and out. And there's ice costs and keeping the venue open for weeks at a time and terrible logistics. But I mean, the feels when you're in that arena and Sheldon Kennedy's story gets, told, or Brian Savage's story gets told, and you've been through all of them and you've gone through all the charities and all the athletes as well. But I mean, I think to me, the power of connection to community, and even after interviewing them when the athletes, when they go, when they're voted off, I mean, it's just such an awkward interview because they're athletes, they're type A's, they're alphas, and you have to explain to them that there are no losers in this show. It's kind of a gift that you actually don't have to get banged up for the next few weeks, and you still got the $10,000 or $15,000 for your charity to leave early and get to join the show afterwards. But they just have this hardwiring for winning this thing.
You remember Theron Fleury skated with Jamie Soleil. So Jamie won it the original season with Craig Simpson. Year two, Jamie's partnered with Theron Fleury, and this is one of the nights Tyler Cranston was a judge, and he voted Theo off the show. And he was into a dissertation about, why he had to do it, and he felt bad about doing it, and that the performance was great. And Theron just interrupted him and said, "It's okay, Tyler. We get it. You don't have to keep explaining yourself. We get it. We're off." And I remember Bob Probert, bless his heart, he was really upset too the first season when he got knocked off first show. And he was our cachet. I mean, we had Kurt Browning, obviously, and it was, as you said, Sandra Bezic and Kevin Albrecht were the co-conspirators to create the whole idea. And I just didn't think the hockey players would be able to get out of their shell and, as I said, be vulnerable, like you are so right about that. And I do think it's important, if there's a great lesson in it, that was the way you could frame it, is that I'm doing this for the benefit of somebody else. It's not how do I look, how great am I? It's what could I do for someone. That really was the saving grace. Because I'll tell you, Chuck, you go in the dressing room before show one, night one. I'll never forget Claude Lemieux. We picked Claude Lemieux, who had won the Conn Smythe Trophy, had won Stanley Cups with 3 different teams. He was partnered with Shaylin Bourne, and they were the 2 we targeted for the first skate, because that was going to make or break us. If the first couple came out and fell all over themselves, well, the trembling going on in the room would only intensify. But they came out and nailed it. And after that skate, you knew we had something. The lighting was great. Joan Tassani, the director, knew what she was doing. Everything, looked big. It was just a matter of let's not have former hockey players falling down 10 times and people getting hurt. And that didn't happen. Knock on wood. I mean, I don't know how we got through 6 seasons. We had some injuries in practice, as you know. Marie-France Dubreuil was very lucky, but George Laraque was very lucky, yes. Skate to the head. But we never had on, because we went into that first show with a meeting after meeting about here's what we do when the injury happens, when the blood is pouring out of the figure skater's head or the hockey player's head. We are going to cut to commercial after we establish that they've been taken by ambulance to hospital. And then we are just going to run the dress rehearsal performances for the rest of the evening. No way we expect a skater to continue skating, having witnessed that. That never happened. And that's something that maybe folks don't know, but it was, especially early on, we were dealing with older skaters. The hockey players, by and large, were closer to 50 than to 40. And we were just nervous wrecks. I know we all were, but it worked.
Yeah, there's
your hockey night, Blazer. You've gone from grapes to me.
Yeah, this was at Upper Canada College on the media day. Yeah. And I remember bringing my my photographer with me, Sarah, and I was coming out on the ice trying to be quiet and everything like that because you were on the ice telling your story. It was the backwards sign on the ice.
Was it PJ Stock? Yes, the family. Yeah. So PJ
you want to tell it really quickly?
Yeah. He has 4 children, and they each had a sign. One was PJ, one was one was my, and one was dad. So they were just have 4 kids with PJ is my dad, but they lined up in the wrong order on TV, and it ended up being is PJ my dad. So, not good.
and here I come out worst timing. You're telling that story on the ice on Upper Canada College ice, and all the reporters there and cameras there, and I come right in the middle. I'm trying to be quiet, and you're like, "Oh, hey, Chuck, thanks for joining us." And I'm like, Although that sounded really great to anybody else, that I'm interrupting the story. That was such a great story as well. But really quickly, there's a picture of I don't know if we have it. Me, you, and Kurt. Funniest story. I remember interviewing. I forget their names. Big Vlad was the big NHL defenseman, played for the Flyers, and is Ukrainian. And that was the most difficult interview of my entire life. And I met Kurt downstairs in the restaurant at One King.
Was he with Elena Berezhnaya? I can't remember. Or was it Katerina?
Small, yeah. And I think I forget who it was, but she was angry and she went after Kurt like on the ice, and they had to hold her back, and she's like 4'11", and Kurt was just saying, "Yeah, no, she attacked me." that was really awkward. I'm like, it's supposed to be a family show and charity, and these things happen, but just like the wires get crossed sometimes, and
Kurt. So remember, we had Dick Button, who was kind of an iconic figure skating judge or commentator, and he came on as a judge for us. But Kurt, when he first went to the judges' dais, I mean, he was critical. He wasn't holding back. He wanted the show to have legitimacy in terms of teaching moments and improvement moments, and it was good. That was the thing I think Sandra wanted to achieve, was to have a little bit of credibility in terms of it's not just all bouquets.
Yeah. I want to pivot as well, because I want to try and get as much as I possibly can in as well. But I want to pivot to the Indigenous conversation as well, obviously with the residential schools that we've been finding out, rewriting history as Canadians. Obviously, you and I are both base brats. So we have this, growing up pride of the military and service and being a proud Canadian, and nothing has made me feel more deflated as a Canadian than reading about this as well. I had lunch with Reggie Leach and Don Madabi. Actually, we had Don on the show a couple months ago when the news broke as well. And it was just deflating. During lunch, Reggie and Don and I were talking about, there's Reggie and Don right there. That's Reggie on the left, obviously. Great Philadelphia Flyer, Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Stanley Cup. His lovely wife, Dawn, but talking about obviously the shift that's about to happen, in the mentality. And I wanted to get your take on that, because I know this is so important to you in the Indigenous conversation as well. First of all, why is it important to you, and moving forward as well, how can we be better?
Well, I was blessed to read 2 great books by John Ralston Saul. Actually, I have one over here on my desk. It's called The Comeback, and that's really the one you should read. He also has a book called A Fair Country, in which he articulates how you married up when you married into the Métis or Indigenous worlds when you came here first. And then, of course, we didn't honor the treaties, and the rest of the story is an attempt at assimilation. When I kind of got really motivated after reading those books was when we hit the road for hometown hockey, Chuck, and we would go to Cranbrook, and I would meet Catherine Tanise, who is a great spokesperson on Truth and Reconciliation. And same with Salmon Arm, BC. We did the show there. That's the home of Mary Thomas, considered the mother of Truth and Reconciliation. We went over to Kamloops, and I met Tanya Willard out of Merritt, BC. She's a great artist. and she wrote the opening for our show. And then I went over to Manitoba, and Chief Glenn Hudson at Peguis First Nation. He worked in the oil patch. He's an engineer. He was up in Fort McMurray for years on end, and then he came back to his home to be chief of the community. And this was during the blockades. That was hereditary chiefs, not the chief of Peguis, but still, he knew both sides of the story, and he could articulate both sides of the story. And Murray Sinclair is from Peguis. He's a great justice and senator. Keith Cormier out in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. I mean, I could go on and on about Chief Stacy Laforme down here at Mississaugas of the Credit, which is the territory upon which we're doing this show. When I had, as an example, when Don Cherry decided not to come back to apologize and move away from Hockey Night in Canada, it was a huge story, as you know, and I was sort of at a loss how to frame it or how to talk about it. And so the first call I made was to Chief Stacy Laforme, Mississaugas of the Credit, First Nation, who would know how to try and move away from guilt and shame and I don't know that I did that, perfectly, of course, but that's who I trust to help guide me on, I'll take their 10,000 years of experience in negotiation and use it to help frame an argument or a conversation. So that it's a big deal. Last thing I'll say about it is, Richard Wagamese wrote Indian Horse, which is essentially the story of Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild, who is from Waskamachees in Alberta. We used to call it Hobbema. But Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild went to the University of Alberta to get his law, to play hockey, great hockey player, and Indian Horse is his story, more or less, written by Wagamese. Wagamese left a residential school, ran from it in St. Catharines neighborhood, and had nowhere to go. It was winter, and he lived in a manger. There was a nativity scene out front of a church in St. Catharines, and the spotlights provided a little bit of warmth. And this brilliant writer, Richard Wagamese, who's written tons of fantastic books, spent that winter in a manger, ironically, in the front yard of a church, so to bring that whole residential school story full circle. I think he's gone now, Richard, but he ended up in Kamloops where the first discoveries were made. And yeah, it's a, as you know, it's an atrocious element to our past. But I again, the thing about our world is it's filled with xenophobia could be created by war. It can be created by terrorism, international safety concerns, so many reasons why we become xenophobic. But it's one that we're thankfully going to learn from and to improve upon.
I don't know what it's like, obviously, to be Ron MacLean, but I know too much given, much is expected. And you've been scrutinized an awful lot. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to your contract year. I think it was 01 or 02, where Johnny Meehan had told you to step aside and, wait it all out. And you got to see how much Canada loved you. And I remember just the outpouring of the emotion of people just saying, bring Ron MacLean back. Then obviously you got your Grapes issue, you got your Gary Bettmans, the perseverance and the resilience that you've had to show. You mentioned during the Grapes debacle, you go reach out to the Indigenous community and be progressive and ask. I had Brian Kitts from the You Can Play Project on the show in June during Pride Month. And one of the things Brian and I were talking about is how you reached out to him privately, asking him how you could be better, being more progressive in that conversation of the homophobic slur that was allegedly taken, by people who want to lambaste you with that, when everybody who knows you is this the most ridiculous conversation in the entire world. But that's where I love the proactive Ron MacLean, where, nobody knows this. Nobody knows behind the scenes that you're making the call to Brian Kitts and reaching out to the LGBT community, finding out, hey, listen, I need to be a better person about this. How could that have been taken this way, or how could it be better?
Yeah, because it's a responsibility, right, Chuck? I can't just sit and look in the mirror and say, you've got this. I don't feel like I trust my intuition to a point, but I also trust my memory, which is my history, which is what I read or watch or listen to. I trust knowledge. I trust, there's so many components that go into every individual decision. But now, as we've seen with media especially, it's no longer a pronouncement from the New York Times or the Observer in the UK or CBC National News. There's horizontally going on Twitter and social platforms, lots of wisdom as well, lots of opinion, lots of reason to think, okay, in academia, they call reaching your audience code switching, knowing who you are speaking to and trying to speak in a sensitive manner. But how do you do that when you've got 10 million viewers watching a Toronto Maple Leaf game in the spring? You don't know, and you still, whether you like it or not, you owe that space of the other their part in this whole equation. It's not just you and Chuck having a conversation, but there's a third person listening who's entitled to a vote. Back to Malcolm X. Don't make me take the bullets without a ballot. So if you're going to listen and if you're going to be part of this entertainment that we're providing, you're good enough to listen. You're good enough to have a voice. And so I respect that space. And I was dumbfounded, and I felt like, it was very unfair that I got caught in a simple, for me, a reference to rum drinking and a guy high on himself must be under the influence. But I could see, where words are easy to misconstrue. And since people got caught in that, I had to be very careful not to then say, well, you're foolish to be caught in that. What's the matter with you? Can't do that. So that it's just going to be, always and ever present in your, and you don't want to lose yourself, right? You don't want to incarcerate your mind or shackle yourself to the point of frozen from being who you are. But I was who I was perceived to be there. And all I can do is go to the mirror and say, well, but that's not who you are, Ron. So don't worry about it. Give what you can, and try to remain true to who you are.
I want to talk about while we're on that topic as well, stay with perseverance as well, because obviously resiliency, you deal with a high level of brass and a high level of accountability, obviously, as we've seen. You and I had talked, like I said, we were talking at the Conrad Lineman, Jane Rue's celebration at MacLean. And that was when Strong was coming out. And I was just amazed with your resiliency. And, and I think for the kids that are watching. Yeah, and I get that. But I mean, like, when that's your identity and someone's coming in, whether you like George or not, and you did say that. I remember you saying, George is going to do fine. I love George. George is a great guy. But, there's an identity that we hold on to. Our ego kicks in a little bit, and you just got to reel it back a bit if you're enough to do that. But for the kids that are watching as well, that don't really see, it's an instant gratification, world that we live in right now. Nobody sees how hard Ron MacLean works behind the scenes. I've watched you practice at Battle of the Blades and doing your lines, and that takes real work. Your memory is like savantish on recall, and you work really hard. And I think people look at you and just think you got an easy gig. Right? You're the host of Hockey Night in Canada. They don't see the backside, of what you have to deal with in order to be resilient and to be able to, keep on being progressive. But what's it like for Ron MacLean for being progressive and resilient?
Well, there's a lot there, but Bruce Springsteen in his memoir talked about when he first went to England, and there were posters announcing, America's greatest new talent, and he went and ripped all the posters down, and he says, "Don't tell me, show me. I don't want to have people talk about me. I'll show them what I can do." And that's all you as a broadcaster, you definitely don't need to be known for how hard you work or whether you use a teleprompter or don't, which I don't, that's immaterial to the end result. If the joke's funny, the people will laugh, as they say. That's the truth of show business. So you're held to that sort of very honest metric. Just like the clock doesn't mete out respect, the camera doesn't really favor anyone in particular either. So you go in knowing that. You work hard. I was taught 10 hours of prep every hour on the air, and I try to adhere to that a little bit. And I enjoy it. And I enjoy making people, like I was also taught, let your guest be the star. And it was a great lesson. And it seemed to hold me in good stead. And then after that, Chuck, there was a great, like, as you know, I refereed hockey for 23 years, pretty high levels. Mm-hmm. And there was a great umpire I admired, a guy named Bill Clem. And he used to say, if you can have my job, I don't want the job. There was no threat, right? It's got nothing to do with status anxiety. I don't experience status anxiety. I don't need to be on Hockey Night in Canada to walk out the front door and enjoy a walk with my dog or dinner with Carrie or beer with friends. It's all going to be there with or without Hockey Night in Canada. But having said that, I enjoy Kevin Bieksa and Campbell Pascal. Yeah, just the way I enjoyed whomever I've ever worked with. I've been really lucky to have so many great experiences. Jim Bannon on horse racing, Jim Nelford on golf, Don Whitman and Michael Smith and Jeffrey Gowan on track and field, and on and on. It's just that is fun. Who would deny?
Well said, man. Well said. I just love your insight, man. I really do. I want to pivot here. Obviously, this isn't something that's talked about at parties. This is a very somber moment, but I wanted to do justice and some due diligence to the Humboldt Broncos as well. I think we got a picture of you at an event dropping the puck as well.
Ah, yeah, great.
There you go. And obviously, this was such a huge story when it broke. I was down in the Bahamas, and I felt so disconnected as a Canadian, and just the tragedy and scope of this, what came to be as well. And you and Don were in the trenches with this one from the very start as well. So I'm just going to let you just kind of like give a shout out and talk a little bit about that for your experience, and for parents as well, and connecting that and being able to do what you could do.
Well, I was just with the Wack family and the Joseph families. They lost Stephen, and Jackson Joseph perished in the crash. That photo you just showed was from a couple of years ago. We had a hockey tournament for 3 days, 5 games. And my defensive partner was Nick Holden, who is now over in Ottawa. He was with the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And we lost, the team we lost to, the number 1 D tandem was Colton Parayko, who had just won the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues 2 weeks earlier. And he showed up and played 5 games in 3 days. And his partner was Chris Joseph, former NHL player. And it was unbelievable. We had NHL players, American Hockey League players, Western Hockey League players, and they all came to be there to support the family, much the way there will be people coming for Caleb and Ronan and Parker's, story in Surrey. And I often think of when I went to Royal University Hospital, Caleb Dahlgren's got a new book out called Crossroads. And I just think it's a fantastic book. And I remember when I first saw Caleb in hospital, he was being prepped for surgery, spinal cord surgery, and he had needles up and down his arm, and he hates needles. He's a type 1 diabetic. And I said, well, I like needles, Caleb. I was a DJ, so I used to spin the 45 records, and I always loved putting the needle down on Casey Kasem's American Top 40. It used to come on 3 vinyl LPs. And I said, and Mozart, when the movie Out of Africa, Robert Redford says to Meryl Streep, I'm going to play a record player in front of all the monkeys and chimpanzees and lions. And the first time they ever hear a man-made sound, it'll be Mozart. And he does. And it's, that's my needle, is the one on the record player. But Broncos are, I say this all the time, they're the answer to the question is, was it worth it? Was it important to have been a hockey broadcaster? I would have said no, until the example of the Humboldt Broncos, from President Kevin Geringer to the coach Darcy Hogan to the captain Logan Schatz, to the trainer Dana Braun, to the Tyler Bieber, the broadcaster. There has never been a group of 29 like them. For however many cups Montreal has won and so forth. They're the story that tells me it is worth it.
Mm-hmm. Such a sobering story. Mm-hmm. I hope we never have to go through anything like that again, obviously, with the tragedy out in BC that happened yesterday and this weekend. It's every parent's worst nightmare to get that call. And I can't even imagine the trauma that's still there to this day, even with people like yourself and Don and going out there and
we can't help, Chuck, but they help each other. That's what's great about a team. I watch in just amazement at how great, and there's always a yin to someone's yang. Because that's a lot of divorce happens after the death of a child, because one wants to cocoon and one wants to go out and be an advocate for the cause, and they're kind of at odds on how to approach the grieving process, which is so understandable. This is 29 people were involved in the team, and it's an incredible community that's been there. It can't erase the pain. It can't make for a happy ending, but it is just gorgeous to watch Chris Joseph say, okay, we're going to have a legacy center, but it isn't going to be a place of sadness. It's going to be a place of energy, just like that team, and love it. And you need that, you need that person, and you also need the person that's kind of still holding, dear to their fear and trying to be, accepted for who they are and what they're going through. And that's why they're good as a team, really good.
I said I'd do my best to try and make this an hour. It's I'm going to fail miserably at this one, but before we go, I want to do a little rapid fire with you. I think try and keep it light. So okay, so I'm just going to go down a list of questions. You kind of give me your bullet shots. We talked about music, but who's your favorite? I'm not going to say who's your favorite band because that would be silly, but who are your favorite bands? Well,
Well, the Canadian bands, I love Gord Downie and the Hip. I love Blue Rodeo. I love Matt Mays and Sam Roberts. Obviously, some of the ones you've listed there, Hart. I'm a big fan of CanCon because I was a DJ and you had to play 33% of your songs had to be CanCon, and I grew to love them more than that. It's because they're the best.
Yeah.
But it also helped that I was sort of brainwashed into my admiration. And yeah, I'll give dibs though to the great Gord Downie.
Who do you still want to meet?
I'll tell you who I admired was Louis Lapham, is the longtime editor of Harper's Magazine, and I have every book of his on the shelf. And it's interesting because after George Floyd died, I kind of went to Louis to look for. I've never met him, never spent time with him. I think we're two old white guys having a conversation about George Floyd, and that kind of struck me immediately. Mm-hmm. So now. I mean, you say in kind of grandiose terms, it would sure be cool to meet the Dalai Lama, or it would sure be cool to meet, Desmond Tutu, or some of these people who have been given that crazy role in life. But I'm not really that person. I think I'm happy to meet you, as you know, or anybody else along the way. And I figure I'll learn a lot from you and the next person I have a beer with.
Give us your best act of random kindness that you received.
Oh boy, that's a good one. Well, I'll tell you again, after the Don Cherry thing, which everybody knows, Don left Hockey Night in Canada because of he had just projected a behavior on people who are immigrants who hadn't bought poppies, and we needed to fix it. And he just at 85 decided, I'm not fixing it, and that was that. But it was a terrible situation to go through for me. And I arrived in Dauphin, Manitoba. And a chief from Treaty 2 territory gave me this feather, and I'm holding an eagle feather with the Dauphin Treaty 2 First Nation area, and it was just it was an incredible. It was I'd flown through the night. I'd been met by not Secret Service, but security. I get off a plane in Winnipeg at 2 a.m, and there's 6'6" security guards because I'm going to be attacked for this whole Don Cherry thing. And there's, there's protests happening all across the country, and it was just an insane time. And that was the best. That was my favorite.
You mentioned Gordon Lightfoot, but who your biggest geek moment of who you got to meet that you
Tom Wilkinson. He was a quarterback for the Edmonton Eskimos. I can't say Edmonton Eskimos anymore. The Elks. Sorry, that was a Freudian. But he was a guy I really admired. He was funny. He was a great quarterback of a CFL football team, and I interviewed him. He came to Red Deer to do a steak and beans fundraiser for the Kidney Foundation, and I was terrified. But that's my big geek moment.
So this is the last rapid fire question before we wrap up, but I want to know your take on what you want your legacy to be remembered for.
Well, honestly, that's back to status anxiety. If I start to concern myself with a legacy, then I'm going to start to concern myself with holding on to or clinging to something. Now, having said, I don't like the idea of you are what you're perceived to be, and a legacy would be a perception. So I only can answer, at the end of the day to my own, and I have lots of deficiencies and warts like we all do. But I only answer to those and sort of internalize the idea of a legacy being kind of kind and good. The art of loving is to love oneself so that you can do that to others. So yeah, that's all, Chuck, there. I definitely am not big on awards. I give all my awards away if I can, just to remind myself of that. You're muted there.
You're just too much on the broadcasting side that you pick stuff like that up. I'm geeking out right now, Ron. That's what's going on right now. It's like state president in the moment. You're almost there at the finish line. Just lean into the tape.
Silence is good. It's like Matt Galloway. He interviewed Barack Obama this year, and he had a great little bit of wisdom he taught me. Galloway at CBC. He does the Current. He says, I have a sticker, a little Post-it note on my microphone. It says, "Stop talking." So
the art I've never learned.
No, me either.
I think, in interviewing, like you hit the nail on the head, make your guest the show, and then make it less about me as well. And, for you to be on the show as well, it's just, you make it really easy to do that. But before we go, I wanted to give out a shout out, Mark Anthony Hair Products, who obviously does this. Obviously, I know that probably wouldn't be a great gift package for yourself. But,
Thank you. Yeah,
Carrie,
I won't be needing that.
but for Carrie as well, we've got a picture of you and Carrie as well. There's Carrie, your lovely wife, and I think if you want to give that to Carrie, the people at Mark Anthony would be more than happy to.
Great. Yeah.
To make the dew come out for Carrie as well. And we also have our friends at Holy Chuck Burger. It's not just a great name, Ron. It's actually a sick burger. And Johnny from Holy Chuck, I know that you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
There you go. Just seeing my names in the neon light, hits me right in the feels. It just hits me right in the feels. But that burger gives me a meat sweats coma, where you wake up and you're like, where the hell am I? Like, this is just such a great burger. But Johnny from Holy Chuck Burger, as generous as he is, he works a lot with us on the mental health side. There's Johnny there with the meat sweats on that burger. But he's a big advocate of mental health awareness and Mental Health Monday as well. And he's going to provide you with some gift cards as well. And then generously enough, going to give you a call out so that way he will cater one of your charity events of your choice. So that way everybody else in the Ron MacLean field can experience what the meat sweats are from Holy Chuck. But you have to say Holy Chuck.
Johnny, we met each other at Kevin Weeks at a great summer soiree a couple of years ago. You're the best. Your burgers are by far the best. And holy Chuck, thank you.
I was actually way too good. I'm not used to my guests being that good, Ron MacLean. But before we go, I want to give you the last word as well. I want to thank you for being on the show. But anything else that I've missed or shout out to? Or?
Chuck, we'll come back to the mutual respect of our experience at Battle of the Blades. Was just watching people given a challenge to learn something new in order to create charities, create opportunities for charities. You were a big part of that, and I'm grateful for getting to meet you there and getting to share all those years on Blades and getting to do the podcast today. It was great. Continued success to you and Carrie. Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough, because obviously there's a million places you can be right now. And, I've talked about this for a couple of years as well. And the timing just hasn't been, where it's kind of been workable as well. But on the hottest day of August right now, I want to thank you for being on the show on Mental Health Monday. Thanks, Ron.
Total pleasure. Thanks, Chuck.
That's Ron MacLean. Oh, man. Like I said, there's a time where you're just going to geek out. And that's obviously me right now. But I want to thank Ron MacLean for being on the show. And honestly, I want to thank Carrie, his wife, for sharing Ron MacLean with us, because, there's a lot that Ron does. He bites off a lot and he chews it all. But there wouldn't be any of that if Carrie wouldn't, want to share Ron MacLean with us as well. So Carrie, thank you. Hopefully you enjoy those Mark Anthony Air products. They might give you curls like this. So anyways, I want to thank Holy Chuck and Mark Anthony, of our sponsors for the show today on Mental Health Monday. Sorry we didn't get to your questions as well with Ron MacLean, but I will go do my best to go down the box down and comment on those. If you have anything that you want to drop in the box as well, feel free. We'll get back to you as well. But I want to thank you for being on the show for Mental Health Monday.